Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about awkward lifts and why they make you strong. And I mean, we could define awkward lifts as either lifts that pull you into an unusual center of gravity, such as a safety bar squat, or exercises in which you break up the eccentric concentric chain, such as again a box squat, a floor press. In other words, things that are dead stop training. I don't mean just a pause, I mean dead stop, meaning the dead stop on a box is harder than a pause squat. The dead stop at the bottom of a floor press is harder than, say, a bench press, because you're still going to have soft tissue of your chest that you're going to hit. You're still going to have a leg drive, cushioning, all of that stuff, because you have a dead stop when your arms touch the floor, right? Dead stop training. Or to where we take something like a deadlift and make it even harder. I mean, a deadlift already qualifies as an awkward lift, doesn't it? Yeah? The deadlift is an awkward lift. We can make it even harder by doing deficits. And these are just some examples. Some of the stuff I'm showing here fall into that category. And there's a lot of other things that we could think of like that that build a certain type of strength. And what do we mean by that? Well, if they're harder than your conventional exercises. In other words, variations of these lifts that, because of either their awkwardness or the dead stop nature of them, in which they remove your ability to use a stretch reflex, to where you cannot lift as much weight. And I think the difference here, because you see some of the people out there who discuss some of these lift variations, they want to push you in the direction of easier versions of the lift, right? Easier versions. They're not awkward. You can lift more weight. If you can lift more weight than on the conventional exercise, it's not an awkward version, it's an easier version. And the problem you run into there is that also we're looking at training stress versus recovery. All right, training stress versus recovery. The heavier a weight you lift for any given rate of perceived exertion, guess what? The harder it is on your recovery. In other words, an exercise that gives you the same amount of muscular stimulation with 10% less weight on the same number of reps is easier to recover from. So one way to look at it would be if you take someone like Louis Simmons would tell you, as a perfect example, someone who said you want to get as strong as you can with the lightest weight that you can. And that's one way of looking at it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be lifting heavy. I mean, that's where people mess up. No one's telling you shouldn't try to get your safety bar squat to 600 pounds. All right? No one's telling you shouldn't try to get your floor press to 400 pounds. What people are saying is get as strong as you can with the lightest weight that you can. In other words, use these more awkward exercises to build your strength base. Use the harder variations. Or as Paul Carter would put it, he words it a different way. Again, Paul Carter, fantastic coach. We go to the gym to build strength, not to demonstrate it. Because what are some of the other lifts that you do? These are demonstrations of strength. In other words, if you do some variation of a lift that lets you lift more weight, that's a demonstration of strength. And a perfect example, look at the video. I'm not sure if I'll have it out before or after this one. I'll probably have it out before this one, where I covered Brett McKay from The Art of Manliness, when they talked about the difference between a general strength building deadlift and a competition deadlift. Right? They're not completely the same animal. When we start tweaking an exercise to allow us to display more strength, it's not always the same as building general strength. Now, when I'm talking about these harder variations like this, I'm not saying that the novice necessarily needs to do them. You know what? I think novices do best on conventional exercises. We teach them the basic lifts, right? Basic lifts. Squat, bench, deadlift, standing press, barbell rows, a little bit of accessory work, right? A little bit of accessory work. Bring up their weak points. You know, I mean, if novices want to do curls, it's not the end of the world. You know, they can do some ab work. Not a bad idea for them to do some ab work, some rear delt work, things like that. Because these are potential weak points that are going to develop in almost everyone. And that's fine. But they can benefit from things like a stretch reflex, right? Because novices are not at a point to where the amount of weight that they're lifting is going to seriously impede recovery. And even if it is, their work capacity will be better by next week just from the additional training stress. They don't necessarily need to worry about stuff like this. So I'd say once you start shifting into the intermediate to advanced lifter, priorities change. And that's where stuff like this starts to become really, really useful, because again, the novice lifter, they're just going to build work capacity, and you want them to lift as much weight as possible, right? You take like what the starting strength guys say. They want to take the exercises that use the most muscles possible and allow you to move the heaviest weight possible through the longest effective range of motion. And for general strength buildup, that works very, very well. Well, who needs that? Novices. And I define novices as not just people who are on like their novice linear progression, right? A lot of people have this idea because of their terminology that a novice is someone who has finished their novice linear progression and they're stalling. I'm going to say you're still a novice if you're still struggling to bench 225 for reps or to deadlift 405 for a couple of reps. You're a novice, right? You're a novice lifter. You still don't have a muscle and strength base. You don't have a size base. You don't have a strength base. And they're the same thing, because just because a guy looks a little bit big because he's been doing some delts and arms doesn't mean he's big. If he doesn't have glutes, if he doesn't have hamstrings, if he doesn't have lats, he's still small. That's why you do see some guys over there who they look good, but they're still at a relatively light body weight because they're real lean and some of their show muscles are built. And the people are thinking they're big until you really see them standing side by side, walking around next to guys who actually really lift. And then you realize that that level of thickness and size really isn't there. They're not carrying as much muscle as you think they are. But back to the point, at a certain threshold, we start to run into our ability to do very high volumes of training with these really heavy weights, these exercises encompass. And that's where a lot of these other exercises start to become beneficial. Why? Because you can build the same amount of strength with a lighter weight. And they force you through different planes and angles and other stuff, so that if you get out of your groove on a main exercise, guess what? You're still strong at the awkward ranges of motion. They help you to be better. They will find your weaknesses. And that's what getting strong and getting big is all about. It's about finding all your weaknesses and shoring all of them up. Because if you can get stronger by fixing all your weak links, and that could be even by doing an awkward lift, what happens? Your whole body's going to grow, because you're going to be able to handle bigger weights on the other exercises. So that's where all of these things come in handy. They let you do variations that let you do more total work every week. Because workload and volume are what you have to utilize to get bigger and stronger the more advanced that you get. And that's where we need to understand the difference between the novice lifter, the intermediate, and the more advanced. Is the sort of workloads that you need to generate to continue to make progress, right? Novice lifters don't really benefit from ultra high workloads. They just don't. They don't need it. The more advanced you get, the more your workload's going to have to go up to see anything budge, to see any improvement in your size and strength. And if you can't recover from that increased workload, you've got a problem. Or if you can find a way to recover from doing more, you're going to continue to make progress better as a more advanced lifter. And that means that we use things like the deficit deadlift. Right there's a perfect example. Use things like more compensatory acceleration, dead stop training. These awkward lifts, these harder lifts, because they recruit more muscle fibers with a lighter weight. And they just don't beat you up as much in terms of recovery. So you can do more total sets so that you can do more work through the week. And the beauty of it is when you do some of these awkward exercises and you do a lot of work with them and you get strong at them, when you go to the easier exercises, the squat is an easier exercise than a safety bar or a box squat, right? Look at how awkward that was. Me struggling with it. My first day trying to hit a max on a safety bar. That was brutal. When you go back to the normal exercises, the weights just fly up, right? If you've been stuck at a 450 squat and you go and you build your box squat up for months and your safety bar squat or whatever is a perfect example, then you go back to that 450 squat, it flies up. And all of a sudden you find you've got a 475, a 500. Again, these variations build strength around all your weak points. They make the weight feel lighter when you actually do the easy version, the main version of the lift. And that's the other thing to remember with all this stuff too. So not only do they make everything grow in the sense of you're going to start shoring up your weak points. You're going to be able to do more workload, more volume as you rotate a lot of these things in. They make the primary lifts easier when you go back to them because you've gotten used to doing this hard, awkward stuff. And when you're used to doing a hard, awkward exercise, guess what? The bench press, the squat, the deadlift, the overhead press, all these lifts, they start to feel easy all of a sudden, right? They feel easy, and it's a big confidence boost when you get to them also. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.